Hello and welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to give you a full tour of the sump on my Red Sea Reefer S850. Now, for the most part, the sump on this tank is exactly the same as the sump on all Red Sea Gen 2 tanks, all current Red Sea tanks. There is an extension section that is different and is unique to this tank, the S1000 and the S950 Peninsula, but the main sump is the same as all tanks. So obviously it's slightly different size, it'll be bigger or smaller depending on how big or small your tank is, but this will be the same layout, so you'll put the equipment in the same spot, the water will flow in the same way. So I'm going to show you how the main sump works, so you'll know how the sumps work on all Red Sea tanks, and I'll also show you what I've done in terms of the equipment on this and what I've done in the sump extension section. All right, let's get stuck in. Okay, so here we are in the main sump. And as I say, this is the same layout as you will get in all Red Sea tanks. The sump extension is via some pipes down there, but we'll come on to that later. So let's show you where the water comes in, where it goes, where I put all the equipment and why. So the main drain line is that drain line there. So water comes down from the tank along the back there and into this bit here, which is the Red Sea diaphragm, which I'll come on to in a second. And the emergency drain is the second one there. So if the main drain gets clogged, then water can escape down here. And again, it will go down there and end up in the same spot. When the water comes in, the first thing it comes into is the Red Sea diaphragm valve. Now, if you've had a Gen 1 Red Sea tank, you will probably hate this thing. On the Gen 1 tanks, they were just really difficult to adjust, really fiddly. You couldn't get the fine adjustment that you needed to set the water level in your weir box. On this tank, and I've shown before in other videos, which I'll link in the top corner of the screen up there. In this tank though, this is much, much better. You can adjust things really smoothly, really easily. And in a year of running this tank, I've had no issues with that whatsoever. So I'm pleased to report that is much improved. Okay, so the water comes in there then and goes down this pipe here. Now, I have installed an automatic filter roller, but if you don't have that in there as standard, the tank comes with, you can see here, there's silicone along here. So there is a baffle, a glass baffle along here, and then a glass section along here, which houses filter socks. So the water will come down here into this section of the sump. This is blocked off here, so there's a big wall here as standard. The water goes up there, falls into the filter socks, goes through the filter socks, and then on into the next section. Whereas on this tank, of course, I've just removed the filter sock section, which you just do, you just slide it out, it comes out really easily. You don't need to do any alterations to the sump. In this tank though, the water comes down here, as you can see, into this pipe here, which goes into the filter roller. So it goes into the filter roller, clogs up the roll. The roll then turns, and as you can see, this is what the roll looks like, nice and dark. This is actually much darker than on my last Red Sea roll. I presume that's because of the nature of this tank rather than anything else. But anyway, it clogs that up and goes a nice brown color, removes nutrients that I don't want in this tank because I have relatively high nutrients. The water actually exits at the bottom here, so it comes out at the bottom there and will then go from there. You can actually get this little basket, this media basket, which I've just got loose under there. That's supposed to sit under the Red Sea Reef mat. I don't like it. I think it's a bit awkward to get access to. You can put things like Reefer or activated carbon in there, but that for me is just a waste of time because it's just too fiddly to get access to and you don't change it regularly enough. But if you want to do that, you can do. Instead, you can see that along here I have put a few bits of rock rubble that I've got here as well. So the water comes out of there then and then travels across into this section. This is where most people will have reactors or possibly a refugium. If you want to run a refugium, this is the section for it, and I'll tell you why in a minute. The reason that I have reactors in here though, well actually I say I have reactors in here. So what I really have is the base of my phosphate reactor, which I've taken offline at the moment. That's not working because I don't need it, although I'm going to put that back online pretty soon, so that will be back up. You could fit that in there just about. The top will just about clear this, so it won't touch that. So if you have a phosphate reactor in there, you will probably also have space for one, maybe two other reactors if you're careful with planning. So you could put a UV sterilizer in there or something. You could put a kalkwasser stirrer, a bioball reactor, biopellet reactor, all sorts of other things in there. Probably enough room for two reactors, I would say, on this tank, probably on most tanks, but obviously the smaller the sump, the less size you'll have. You could also put a skimmer in here, But the better way, or well, what I've done and well, the way this is designed, is to have the skimmer at the back. Now, actually what happens on this tank is there's a pipe that goes through there that goes into the extension section. I'll come on to that in a minute because I think it's more useful to show you what would happen on a normal tank that doesn't have the extension section. So actually on this tank, I could, if I wanted to, block off the pipes for the extension section. And then instead of these solid baffles here, you can just remove those and replace them with teeth so the water can pass through there. And that's what happens on most of these tanks. So the water will then pass through there and into your skimmer section. And that, by the way, is why you would have your refugium here, because with these bits, if you replace these with the teeth, so it's weir comb teeth, that will stop, for the most part, that will stop strands of Cheeto escaping into your skimmer section and clogging up your skimmer. That's always likely to happen anyway. You're going to get some Cheeto escaping, but the teeth will stop that happening to some degree. And actually, if you were to have the refugium in this section here instead, then there's no weir comb to block water, and in the final section is your return pump, so there's no weir comb to stop the Kato or Cheeto escaping and clogging up your return pump, which is even worse than clogging up your skimmer. So that's why you should have a refugium in this section if you choose to do so. As I say though, I have the skimmer back here. So this is a Bubble King, was it a double cone 180? Fantastic skimmer. You can see how filthy it is. That's probably because I haven't emptied it for at least a month. But that's my skimmer. It's quite a big skimmer because it has an external pump. So you can see the pump down there. Most skimmers they have a pump inside the skimmer body itself, but this is external, so it takes up quite a lot of space. That is where my skimmer goes. It's generally absolutely fine. The only issue with having, so most sumps actually are sort of 3 or 4 rectangular sections all cut off with baffles, whereas this is 4 corners. And the only issue with that really is that if you had a reactor, if you had a couple of reactors here sticking out of the water to that kind of level, getting access to the skimmer cup gets a little bit awkward. So when I do have a phosphate reactor in here, I can still get the skimmer cup out. It's just a little bit more awkward, and actually trying to get your hands in the first place, you've got to watch out for the phosphate reactor, and then you've got to roughly squeeze the skimmer cup past your phosphate reactor or whatever other reactor you have. So space is a little bit restricted because of that. It does make access a tiny bit awkward, but I prefer the layout. I think it makes better use, and having squares for your filters, I think, is a much better layout personally. But that's the trade-off. That's the price you pay for having corners. There's not a massive amount else to say about the skimmer section. I have chosen to put the heaters in that section. So there's a heater down there. There's another one actually the other one might be in my Sump extension, but my heater is down there. That's a Seche, the Bluetooth contactless one, whatever it's called. Seche heater in there, and that is where I have that. The reason I have that in there is because, where is it? Just down here, you can't really see it actually, but just down there is my temperature sensor. So I think actually probably in a way, the best place to have a heater is down here somewhere, because that's where the water flows. So the water will constantly flow over the heater, but you don't want the heater in the same section as the temperature sensor, because the temperature will sense the water in the heated part. So you want the temperature sensor upstream of your heater, because then water will flow through, and this will give you, the heater will then be working off a true reading rather than the slightly warmer section that it would be sat in otherwise. So that's where I have my heater. It's just loosely in there, it's not particularly neatly done. The other thing, before we go into the final section, you can see here, and I've talked about this a few times, I cut away a little section at the back there and installed some PC fans just off Amazon. They're about 10 or 15 quid, something like that, because the ventilation on this tank is more or less non-existent. There is some over that side, which I'll show you in a minute. There's a tiny bit up there. That's basically the only hole for ventilation. So ventilation is really bad in here. And if you don't have some kind of fan, I find, so I've had this from day one, but on my last Red Sea tank, it was the same. And I had no ventilation in it. The cabinet got really sweaty, and it meant that the tank overheated in the summer as well, which made it so it was more difficult to control temperature when the weather gets really hot. So it's well worth installing some kind of ventilation. And the only thing I'll say on this, I messed up a little bit because, let's see if I can show you here. There's a little drip, a bit of salt creep there that I can't get to. So salt has dripped down a tiny little bit between the glass and the fan, and it just drips down there this tiny little bit. I don't know if it's ongoing or if it was just a one-off, but I can't get to that to clean it. So really, what you should do is have this higher up so you can then get to that bit to access it and clean it if you need to. Okay then, apart from that, the last section is right at the back. How easy is this going to be to film? Not too bad. So this section is the return pump section. Now, well, at least this tank does. I'm not sure if all Red Sea G2 tanks do, but they come with the option of a splitter here, so you can use 2 return pumps if you wish. I've chosen not to do that though. So that is where my return pump goes. You don't have an awful lot in this particular section. I just have the return pump in there, which is a Reef factory base pump at the moment. And then my auto top off, of course. This is the outlet for the auto top off, which is where the water comes from, the tube the water comes from. I've drilled a little hole back there as well, so I can run the tube behind this tank and into my freshwater reservoir, and I will show you where that is. So this tank doesn't come with a freshwater reservoir. The old Red Sea ones used to. I hated it, it just got in the way, so they've abandoned that now. And instead I have this freshwater reservoir by the side of my tank. This holds something like 80 litres, which is good for just over a week of evaporation, probably about 10 days maximum. This was a little DIY lid I made just out of plywood, and I put a bit of rubber on it. As you can see there, this adhesive rubber, which I also put on the underside of the freshwater reservoir because, whoop, and let's see, there is the pump for the Red Sea auto top off. I find that pump a little bit noisy. If it's inside your sump, inside your sump cabinet, sorry, it's probably not so much of an issue, but I find that a little bit noisy, and without any kind of vibration dampening and without any soundproofing, I could hear that. And in fact, there were times when, well, regularly I would hear it when I'm upstairs in bed trying to sleep. That would turn on and I'd hear a buzzing. But if you put some kind of vibration dampening under the container and also a bit on the top with a lid, it completely sorts that, or 99% of it sorts it. So now it's relatively quiet. Okay, final thing I need to show you is the actual sensor for the auto top off. If I can crane the camera around enough. So there it is back in there. And this is the standard holder, the standard bracket for the Red Sea tanks. This tank, this is on this tank, it's in a really awkward spot, right in the far corner, which means, as you can see, your head would have to do this in order to see where it's going, get round, navigate round your filter roll, around your skimmer. It's a pain. From what I understand, they've now changed that, and I had a few comments on my last video saying that it's now in this corner, which is much easier to see. So that is better if they have indeed done that. So that then is the main sump section, and that is the layout roughly of any G2 Red Sea sump. Obviously, if you've got a 3-foot tank, your sump will be a little bit smaller because this entire section is 3 foot. If you've got a 6-foot tank, it will be roughly the same, maybe even a little bit bigger. The other thing actually I'll tell you very briefly about in here, this is where I've fixed my dosing pumps. They're nice and out of the way, so they don't take up any space here. This is for all my main stuff, alkalinity, magnesium and calcium. This 4th one is for magnesium, not magnesium, manganese. And then I have these 2 as spare ones. I have a bottle of nitrate here in case my nitrate ever bottoms out. At the moment I'm not dosing that, but I can just turn it on if I need to, if my nitrate goes to 0. Actually, there is one last thing I've just noticed. So this is the light sensor. This is a Philips Hue motion sensor. And these lights up here, you can see LED strips around the edge. These are Philips Hue LED strips. So as soon as I open the cabinet door, they come on, and I've got it so they turn off after 5 minutes. So when it's not sensed any motion for 5 minutes, the whole thing turns off. All right, that is the main section then. Let's take a look at the sump extension. So here we are. The water comes through. There are pipes down here. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see, but there's a pipe that goes through a hole in the central column there. Goes through a hole and then into the sump extension. You can see I've got a few things in the way, and I think most people will use this section for either a big refugium or what I'm doing, which is a frag tank section. So in this one, you could have this entire section if you wanted as a refugium, and you can have a refugium light up at the top. This, I don't know, I haven't measured. Actually, do you know what? I'll measure the dimensions of this and I'll tell you how much water it holds so you can see how big a refugium you could have. But it's a big old unit. It must be 2 feet front to back and maybe 18 inches side to side. And the water level is probably about 1 foot tall. So it's a big section. There's loads of space in here. You can just about see now I've got some frag racks in there. I've so far got a Zoa and a Porites Christmas tree rock. that I don't want in my main tank. Apart from that, I don't have a massive amount in here. I have mounted a UV sterilizer back here as well, and this is one thing I've done to keep this out of the way. Let me just move this fan out of the way actually, which I'll tell you about in a second. I've done that, I've mounted it using a 3D printed bracket that lets me mount it on the side of the sump, because normally with a, don't drop that, normally with a UV sterilizer, you end up mounting it on the side of the cabinet somewhere, it takes up a load of space, but with this little bracket, and this is something I made myself, and I sell on my Etsy store, reefblog.etsy.com. With this, it means that I don't take up any space that I don't need to, and it can sit right in the corner, out of the way. So I have this whole section, or 85–90% of that section for frags, which is great. How have I actually set this up as a frag tank then? Well, there is a light that I've got at the top. That is an AI Blade Grow. It's a 12-inch grow. That's just the light I had lying around. I think that'll be fine, to be fair. It's right at the top. So I've made myself a 3D printed bracket that I fixed it to the ceiling with. I don't sell that, I just made it myself. And that means that it's out of the way, so I can get my hand in here, I can get my head in here if I need to, and it's completely out of the way, but you could mount just with an L bracket, a normal light on there. That's the light, and actually that's running really low at the moment because I don't really have anything in there. And the other thing I have in here is, you can see there's water movement. There's a power head at that end. It's an AI Nero 5 or 3, 5 I think it is, just one that I had lying around. That sits in the corner there, points this way, because the water from this tank, from the tank, goes around there, through there, and then back into the main section of the sump. So this pushes against the water flow, which creates a tiny bit of turbulence maybe. You can actually, as standard, there's a baffle across here. You can see these two brackets here. There's a baffle across here that I've removed that means you can separate this if you want. So you could have half of this, the front half, for example, as a coral frag tray, and the second half you could have as a refugium if you needed even more space, or you could put reactors in here, you could do whatever you want. The only other thing I will say, actually, I've just realized I didn't put that back on properly. The only other thing I have in here really is a couple of auto testers, an alkalinity auto tester and a phosphate auto tester. They are currently offline. I need to replace the pH probe on the KH Keeper, and this has developed a fault that I need to fix. That I can't be bothered to get around to doing, to be completely honest with you. But that's about it. That's all the equipment that I have in here, apart from, of course, the fan. So this is a Tunzi Aquawind 2, I believe. And the idea is that this is connected to my heating controller, which is here. That is the plug for my two heaters, and this is the plug for the fan. So if the currently temperature is at 24.1 degrees, which I think is roughly what I've got it set at, and if the temperature goes up too high, the fan turns on. It blows air across the surface of the water, which causes evaporation, which cools the tank down. The only thing with this is, ideally, you want this fan closer to the water surface. There's a good 3 or 4 inches between the fan and the water surface there, and that means that it won't be as effective as if you had this right at the top of your tank and it was blowing water directly across the surface. This had to blow air. This has to blow air downwards, so it's not 100% as effective. But to be fair, last summer, it did a really good job. There is one last thing that you might be looking at here as well. Actually, this is an air dryer for my ozone generator. This is silica beads, and you can tell by the color that they are expended. They're supposed to be blue when they are dry, so when they are pink or purple, whatever color that is, that means they're wet, and I need to put them in the microwave and replace them. To be honest with you, I started with good intentions, and I replaced that a couple of times early on to make sure that the air going into my ozonizer was nice and dry, but actually since then I've just stopped doing it, and the ozone generator comes on for, I think, 2 hours a day, but it comes on in the middle of the night, so it's well out of the way. Now I'm going to pan back quickly to see if there's anything else in here. This is a little shelf I made from a bit of wood with some sticky back plastic on it, and underneath here, behind obviously a 3D printed blocker, there's just space for a few plug sockets I put in there. So these are all the power bricks and plug sockets for some of the equipment, which I've just done that just to make it look a little bit more tidy. That gives me a shelf, of course, to put things like my dosing liquids. Got a tiny bit, I think I've more or less run out of manganese, so I need to replace that. Dosing liquids along there, some magnesium there, of course, and then just a few bits of equipment. My power supplies back here, I've got the world's largest stack of DJ switches. These are DJ switches. You can find them on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description. They're really good. you can just plug in. You can see that you have to get these adapters. So you plug a plug into that, you plug the adapter into the back of this, and then you've got switchable switches, on-off switches for everything. They're right there. You can see really easily if they're on and off because they're lit, they're illuminated, and they're just fantastic. I love that I can just instantly turn the skimmer off if I want to, or turn whatever else off or on as I need to. This is moving slightly away from the sump, of course, but actually here on my door I used to have the Red Sea slide out panel. I didn't really get on with it, and I found it took up probably about 2 inches of space in here, which was just a waste of space for me. So instead I've gone for an IKEA Skadis rack, S-K-A-D-I-S, with all these sort of loops and clips and buckets for various things like reagent, super glue, frag plugs, various sorts of things, dip. This stuff is brilliant, by the way. So this is all bought with my own money, of course. This is Clearview Aquarium Glass Cleaner. Fritz do something similar. It makes cleaning the glass of your tank so easy. Highly recommend the stuff. Anyway, that is my IKEA Skadis rack, which just lets me put a few more things in there. And that might be the end of the sump tour. Okay, so that is the sump tour done. Now that might have felt like a bit of a whistle-stop tour, and I'm sorry if I went through that too quickly. There was so much to cover that I wanted to get through as much as I could, and I did it in this style rather than the usual voiceover B-roll style, because if I'd have done that, the video would have been 2 hours long and it would have taken me 6 months to make. But if there's anything I've missed, if there's something you saw that I didn't explain or I didn't refer to at all, or if you've got any questions at all about how the water flows, how the sump works, whatever, put it in the comment section below and I will get back to you. And if you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe for next time. And until then, happy reefing.